Life Til Lager. No Life Til Lager.
Welcome to No Life Till Lager, a show about life-affirming lager beer, the breweries who make it, and we that drink it. This is a conversation between three people over 1, 2, or 3 pints. My name is Adam Zuniga. I'm a failed master Cicerone. I'm part of the creative team behind the 6 Most Metal Breweries and Beer Like in Das Movie. And my guests today are Brian Hunt, founder, co-owner at Moonlight Brewing Company. That is the House of Lager and Abbey de St. Humulus in Santa Rosa, California, as well as David Carey, co-chef, co-owner at Camber Events, as well as the Brunch Boys. Cheers and welcome and thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you
Thanks
for having us.
It is an absolute honor to have you both here. Brian, I'm not going to deny I am an absolute fanboy. Sometimes people just can't accept when they ask, what's your favorite beer? They won't take a style. They want to know who the brewery is. They want to know what the label says. When I'm in that situation, I always answer Moonlight, and I always say death and taxes. So it is an honor to have you on No Life Till Lager. And thank you again for joining in the here and now.
You're welcome, and I feel the same when people ask me that.
Oh, well, there, we have so much in common, and I bet we're going to learn so much more over the course of this conversation. And David, so a first for No Life Till Lager. We've never had anyone really but a brewery owner or a brewer on this show. To have a chef joining to give the perspective on beer and food, both together and apart, is a huge honor, a unique perspective. And I have to give you a word of thanks. Since I became a Cicerone, it's been 10 years and running now. Only 2 people have ever used their online directory or somehow found me in the interwebs to say, hey, we're looking to collaborate. What can you do? The first was Jägermeister for their Deer and Beer pairing program, believe it or not, pairing Jägermeister with different craft beer and breweries. And the second was you, my friend, and that is to assist with the Elegance of Beer dinner happening July 30th. In Healdsburg, hosted by Camber Events. So it is an absolute honor, and it shows me that there are no accidents. It was all worth it in the end, and these opportunities keep coming thanks to you. So grateful, David.
Totally. So happy to be here.
Awesome. We are going to do this round table style. We are going to talk about beer, and we're going to talk about food. We're going to talk about lager, and we're going to talk about food, and then we're going to talk about beer and food together. So before we begin, can we just speak to the beers in our hand? I am drinking Side of Rice, which I look forward to every year when it reappears, and it is proof. I was about to say proof that God loves us and wants us to be happy. That was not actually a Ben Franklin quote, but we'll talk about the other one that is. But to me, this proves, adjuncts, they don't have to be bad. They don't have to be a sign of false flavor. They don't have to signify diluted beer. They don't have to be a sign of weakness. When used correctly, they can impart a very, very pleasing quality to any given beer, to this case, a rice lager beer. Brian, I think you're drinking the same. So maybe you can just tell us a little bit about Side of Rice, the history, the origin, the past, the present, and the future of this lager. When did you start brewing a rice lager, and why?
Well, Zach Greenwood, our head brewer, is the one that came up with this beer, and it's 40% rice.
Oh,
whereas traditionally when rice is used in beer, it's about 20%. And Zach said, I want to make a beer not just with rice in it, but that tastes like rice. And I was intrigued, and I said, let's do it. So this is what he came up with. It's got it's not just that the rice thins out the malt flavor, the barley flavor. It's got its own contribution. The way each hop has its own variety of hop has its own contribution to contribute to the flavor.
yes.
That the rice adds to the volume of maltiness, of richness in your mouth.
That is supremely well said. And here's to Zach. Zach, thank you for your service as head brewer at Moonlight. So I've often been told that adjuncts are so that it's an alternative source of sugar for beer, an alternative to malted barley, basically. But I've been told, I've read that they shouldn't lend perceptible flavor or quality to beer. It's only a source of sugar that is ultimately fermented out by yeast. And then I drink a beer like this, and I know that's not true. The beer
Bullshit. Sorry.
And maybe it's as simple as saying, you're using up to 40% rice in this lager. But to me, it is incredibly light. It is incredibly dry. And there's a subtle sweetness that I've come to identify with rice, thanks to side of rice. So, when people drink like Budweiser, for example, who's also known for using rice, there is really no perceptible rice character, really no perceptible character at all. And I don't think people who enjoy Budweiser or swear by it or seek it out are necessarily looking for a rice lager. And Japanese lagers, of course, are also known for using rice as an adjunct to lighten the beer, to dry out the beer. But I think it does lend like a very subtle, pleasant sweetness. So I really enjoy rice in my beer, and I enjoy cider rice because it taught me that adjunct beers, rice beers, don't have to suck. So I'm really going to enjoy this pint. Thank you very much.
There's a big misunderstanding about adjunct beers, and we think it's just about diluting out the flavor to make it cheaper. And in fact, that's not true.
Yeah.
And we all look at, the Germany and the Reinheitsgebot was about all malt beers. And that's actually horse feed, shall we say.
You can say anything. You can say anything on No Life Til Lager. Maybe have another drink.
Before World War I, German lager beers were about 20% rice. All of them, unless you were in Bavaria. Bavaria was a barley growing region, and Bavaria itself had a rule that it had to be all malt. The rest of Germany, hell with that. They were 20% rice.
That's fascinating.
Now, let that settle in a little bit. We think about the Reinheitsgebot goes back to some previous century.
Yeah.
Well, that means nothing here in 2025. Some previous centuries back, plural. And in fact, that's not at all true. That's a misnomer. It wasn't until the run-up to World War I that the word Reinheitsgebot hadn't been used yet. The German purity law hadn't been used. That was a tax law and a way to be politically exclusionary and only have barley that was grown in Germany be used to make beer consumed in Germany. So German marks weren't sent out of the country. And taxes were raised at that time significantly because the Kaiser wanted to have, as you said, the world's biggest navy. And you needed to raise money to do that. And over the centuries, alcohol has always been used to raise taxes, especially taxes for wars. So if you look at the politics of this, it's sadly politics and economics rules a lot of things. And beer is one of them. And the belief that adjuncts are to make beer cheaper is just actually folly.
Yeah. Yeah.
In fact, there's a great series of books out right now by the Master Brewers Association talking about disproving that belief that adjuncts make it cheaper. And they showed that adjuncts, the rice and corn used in the States before World War II, for example, were more expensive than using all barley. But the people preferred it. Customers preferred to drink this beer. It was easier to drink and crisper and more delightful, less heavy.
Yeah. And of course, that speaks to the evolution of beer in the United States. Just, what was available as beer developed here, as immigrants arrived here looking to brew beer from their native land. Adjuncts became increasingly popular because it was what was available, including corn and whatever else. But I think really fascinating, just to your point about taxation in and outside of Bavaria. I mean, I guess we'll emphasize the taxes and death and taxes. Yes, taxes has always played a large part in beer production ever since beer came to be produced on a larger scale. David, can you tell us a bit more about the beer in your hand? Just what are you drinking? What are you tasting?
So I'm drinking the one beer that is always in my fridge, no matter what. So I might have a collection of beers and drinks, but that Death and Taxes will always be in my fridge, no matter what. And for the sake of talking and promoting the elegance of beer, today we are drinking this out of a 26-ounce Riedel wine glass to make sure that all of those flavors and aromas and complexities are showing through the beer the way it should. So cheers to that.
Oh, cheers to that. Here's to proper glassware. I've shared this on No Life Til Lager before, but some of my defining beer experiences have been when beer has been served to me in like a great big oversized red wine glass. And it wasn't just the aroma, the flavor, the experience itself, but the organization, the institution that made those experiences possible. The hospitality around beer and beer service that went to the effort to serve it in an oversized wine glass. And I know that's a big part of what you do and what you're planning with the elegance of beer dinner. One more note before we just kind of move on, and I want to speak to your stories. Death and Taxes, I will share is, likewise. So I always have Moonlight in my fridge. Right now, Side of Rice, reality check. And normally Death and Taxes, but right now it's Black to Reality, a Black Pilsner, speaking to my Black soul. But yes, Death and Taxes is an absolute staple. We're so lucky to see it regularly here in and around the Bay Area into Sonoma County. Brian, maybe you can also just speak to the origin story around this beer, the name, the inspiration, and specifically what it means to be a San Francisco style black lager.
Well, the beer happened one day. I was working at a brewery in Napa, and I had a craving for a beer, and a particular beer. I had a taste in my mouth, and I was like, I want this. But it didn't exist. And I went, well, what the hell? This is when Michael Jackson's World Book of Beer was in vogue, and he was still alive. And it's like, how can there be a beer that's not in this book? And I went, well, why? This book is just a snapshot of the beers being made today and very Eurocentric. So is there a reason that should be all that exists? And the answer was no.
Right answer.
So if I had this taste I wanted, why shouldn't it exist as a beer? Because it was a delicious taste. So I had to up and make it. And that was Death. And pretty much I've never changed the recipe from day one. Some of the hop varieties I can't get anymore, and I've had to switch other ones in there. But it's the exact same malts. It's always been, because that's exactly how I wanted it to taste.
Amazing. And that was Death.
That was Death.
And how did Death become associated with the San Francisco and the dark lager style? I think Moonlight is both famous and infamous for kind of defying styles, creating styles, beating to your own drum. So just was it because it was maybe a little bigger and bolder as a dark lager than people had seen historically around Northern California? Just what does it mean to you to be a San Francisco dark lager? And
well, it is authentically a San Francisco style black lager. I mean, I made it up, but still.
Yeah.
When you look at beers around the world and you say, well, what makes a beer style? And on one angle, you can say, well, it's the water. And that is true. You look what a Pilsner is, and it's the water from Pilsen, because the rainwater falls through the soil and doesn't pick up much minerality. And so by the time a brewer gets that water, it's very low in minerals. And it's like when you salt food, it changes the taste dramatically. Well, we're talking not just sodium chloride table salt, but all the other calcium, magnesium, sulfates, chlorides, carbonates. All those things affect, really isn't that important? I'm making this up. There's 95% water. Can water make that much difference in beer? Oh, yeah, actually it does.
Historically, yes.
Olympia, it's the water. From the land of sky blue water. Rocky Mountain spring water. All breweries advertise their water because their water is what makes that beer. The same way when you salt that beer, it now becomes something different. So
Yeah.
water is, in fact, the most critical aspect that denotes the style in the beginning.
Mhm.
But then every brewer creates the beer from that works for the climate, that works for the food you're eating, the cuisine. And I like to think when people say, so why isn't Death and Taxes German-style Schwarzbier? Schwarz means black lager, black beer. It's kind of the same. And the answer is, when you're walking out of the snow and you're cold, you want a glass with meat and potatoes in there because you want to, get that shivering to stop. Now, when you walk out of the sun and it's 90 Fahrenheit, do you want that beer that's got meat and potatoes in your glass? No, you want a refreshment. And so Death and Taxes, you remember I designed this beer when I was in summertime in Napa because it was hot and I wanted crispness. I wanted delight, but I also wanted richness and refreshment. And that is, you see, what didn't really fit. The Brits don't do that. It's always 50 or 60 something and foggy and cool. And in Germany, it's not generally, well, it didn't used to be, 90 Fahrenheit, even though it's centigrade. So it's a San Francisco style beer because that's what matches the climate here.
I see.
The humidity makes a difference. When it's more humid, it changes how you sweat. And if it's hot, you want to sweat more. If it's cold, you don't want to lose that moisture. And so you want more carbohydrates. This is specifically designed to ferment out very dry. So it doesn't have a lot of residual carbohydrates. And it's the mash is very effective. So there's not a whole lot of starch. You don't get potatoes in there.
Yeah.
You get just crisp, snappy, brisk refreshment. And the tannins in there, you got a lot of tannins. When you drink iced tea and there's something about iced tea or iced coffee, nothing else touches that. That's what's in Death.
I love it. Well, here's to Death. I can stare into it endlessly. I can drink it endlessly. And to your point, it is a beer for the hot, for the cold, for the fog. It is well suited to the unique, we'll say, microclimates throughout the Bay Area and Northern California. So a beer for every occasion. It's been said on this show before, it takes a lot of great beer to make great wine. It takes a lot of coffee to make great beer. Breweries tend to run on coffee. But ultimately, beer is what fuels us. Beer is what inspires us. And I'm so grateful you were inspired by that moment in Napa, wanting a beer that you couldn't quite get yet, that you couldn't quite taste yet. So DIY, do it yourself. That is very punk rock. That is very metal, my friend.
If I can add a little bit more color on that.
Please.
Once a year we make Bony Fingers.
Yes.
And it's kind of a stronger version of Death. The malts are designed differently to be a little richer. There's 4 different dark malts in Death, and I rearranged them and in Bony Fingers. And Bony Fingers is specifically designed for fall, when you have that cold wind blowing dry leaves down the street, and you can almost hear the sound of that. You kind of get a little shiver when you get that. You see that little shiver? That's when you want meat and potatoes in your glass. And Bony Fingers is that. It's got more alcohol. It's got more residual carbohydrates. The malts are not designed to be so clean. They're designed to be a little richer and fuller, to warm you up a little.
Yeah.
You see, and that's why Death is not that beer. And when October comes and that cold wind blows those dry leaves down the street, damn, a Bony Fingers. Oh. So the climate, you see, really is a huge influence.
Yeah. Well, here's to meat and potatoes in the glass when you need it, when you
need it.
And here's to black beer for every occasion, for all time of year, for every time of year. Black beer can meet the moment, hot or cold or anything in between. We're going to get to this. I want to work through kind of your core portfolio of year-round beers, specifically lagers, and then all the seasonals and all the one-offs you make in between. Before we get to present day, before we get to what's happening at Moonlight now, what's happening at Camber now, I want to get to know you both as humans, as people. Can you tell me a bit about life before beer, if there was such a thing, life before beer, before food, before brewing, before cooking? Brian, I think our listeners know you and know of you. The legend and lore looms large, but just tell us a little bit about where you're from, maybe other jobs you had prior to the beer industry, and how you ultimately turned this passion, this craving, into a profession, into professional brewing at Moonlight. Tell us your story, and then I want to hear the same from you, David.
Well, I grew up in Sacramento, and I loved chemistry and biology and thought that meant I should study biochemistry. So I went to college to study biochemistry and soon found out that pre-meds often study biochemistry and their study habits didn't really match mine very well.
Yes.
And so I transferred up to Davis to be a winemaker because I loved fermentation. I'd been fermenting things in high school. Because I transferred up as a junior, I kind of got screwed out of the cool advisors, the faculty advisors. And there was one fermentation science advisor left that no one really gave a shit about, and that's the one I got assigned to. Of course, he was the beer guy. This was 1978 when, beer wasn't cool yet. So I ended up working in his lab because I was broke. And, it was just cool people, just normal people. And in the wine department, it's a little smoother, and people practice their French accent and all this stuff. And I just really like normal people. They're just so much more enjoyable. And that's beer people. So I graduated in brewing, and I went to work for Schlitz in Milwaukee as my first job. And they closed that brewery a year and a half later. And I came back to California and worked in tried to start some of the fledgling breweries at that time, which in the Bay Area. And it was quite a struggle. To give you a concept, so I graduated in March of 80, and Sierra Nevada started in January of 1980.
Yeah.
So it was quite a frontier. When I graduated, there were 43 brewing companies in the United States. New Albion was alive. They were one of that 43. But they were nearly all larger breweries and regional breweries. And Rainier was actually a brewery, and Blitz Weinhardt was a brewery. And who else was around in this part of the country? Not too many other small ones. But
so there were only 43. I see. You're saying there were 43 breweries in operation total, including regional companies and national. Amazing. I see.
Yeah, I mean, Schlitz had 8 breweries. Anheuser-Busch had 8 or 9. Miller had, quite a few. Pabst probably had 3 at that time, if you could imagine that. So, those, I say 43 companies. There were more breweries than that, but not very many.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
So anyway, things changed, and I ended up working at a bunch of places, and a lot of them failed because it was too new. And eventually I said, hell with this. I'm starting my own. So with $5,000 savings and $10,000 on credit cards and $10,000 loan from my parents, I started Moonlight. And I worked a lot of hours. I slept 5.5 nights a week for a while because I was doing 2 jobs, and eventually ended up doing this. So my other job, I didn't really have any other job.
Yeah.
I don't have a choice. I have to make beer.
Shucks. The beer chose you. The beer chose you, my friend.
It did.
You have witnessed the rise, the ebb and flow of the craft beer industry as we know it to date, which is amazing. Moonlight, I think, was formally founded in 1992, correct?
Yep.
and you went to UC Davis, which is now known as one of the premier brewing institutions in the United States. And I'm guessing your beer advisor at the time, did that happen to be Michael Lewis?
Bingo.
Okay. Yep. So again, speaking to the legend and the lore surrounding you and Moonlight, speaking to the pedigree at UC Davis and its professor of brewing emeritus, Michael Lewis, and that we've gone from 43 brewing companies total in the United States, circa 1980 or so, spanning basically Sierra Nevada to Anheuser-Busch, and now to have 9,000 and counting. I mean, that really speaks to the roots of you, of Moonlight, of New Albion, who you cited, of Sierra Nevada, who you cited, of Anchor at the time. What an incredible history and what an incredible story. So thank you for your service, Brian. And to know that's basically all you've done always means that the beer chose you, the death chose you. There are no accidents. This was fate. This was fate. David, I'm curious as well. I know you have a long history of hospitality within the service industry. Can you tell us a little bit about how you became a chef? I know you're from Pennsylvania, northeastern Pennsylvania. I believe that's Yingling country, and you've gone from basically washing dishes to starting your own private chef collective with a group of rogue and renegade chefs. I know you're a graduate of the CIA in New York, just like another one of our patron saints, Mr. Anthony Bourdain. Tell us a little bit about your story, any odd and end jobs you had before the service industry, before hospitality, but what led you to present day? How did you get immersed in it? How did you start cooking? What inspired you and continues to inspire you?
Yeah, I think I'm going to give this answer in relation to beer, since we're on this beer show and we're thinking about beer from the chef's perspective. So I'll save you the kind of glorious culinary career that I've had in terms of like the cooking side, but I'll give you I'll paint the picture as best I can. So, I grew up in northeastern Pennsylvania, and I got a job washing dishes at our local fine dining restaurant when I was 15. And, this was something where my dad had said, do this job now so you know what you don't want to do for the rest of your life. And I kind of had that outlook of working in restaurants. And when I was 17, I got promoted to line cook just because it was a promotion. The guys were a little older than me, and they drank beer and they were really cool. And I wanted to do what they did. And I don't know, I found that cooking just came natural to me. I felt that recipes were something that, I just really connected with. And I also found myself right in the beginning just enjoying hospitality, so much, being able to create experiences for other people. And so a really formative, moment, and I love the fact that this story relates to beer, is that, we had our first chef who taught me the very basics, and his style of cuisine, it was very good, but it was so traditional. Everything was just exactly how you would make it out of the French culinary cookbooks. And then we had another chef take over for him, and he was a bit younger and more progressive. So shout out to my good friend Jeff Hunsinger, and so like one of the first things he did when he wanted to take over the menu is we were doing clams that were steamed in white wine and garlic and butter and herbs, again, just like you would in French cuisine. And Jeff said, hold on a second. And he goes out to the bar and he grabs a pitcher of draft beer, and he comes back and he pours the pitcher of beer into the hot pan of clams and steams them. And I was like, whoa, what are you doing? And he's like, well, what do you mean? He's like, we can do that. I'm like, what do you mean you can do that? Yeah. I'm like, that's beer. You can cook with beer. And he's like, yeah, you can cook with beer. I was like, that is so cool. But not only was I like just mesmerized that somebody is cooking clams with beer, just doing something that, is different from what I was already taught. I tried those clams, and God, the umami flavor that was behind that was just so unbelievable. And, so there was that really formative moment as a young cook. And this is like pre-culinary school and pre, all the fun things I've done in my career. But, that moment really set the stage for me.
Tell me that beer.
It was like,
what was the beer before?
It was nothing
or something.
It was always like, just get the cheap beer out of the draft, so we're not spending money on the expensive beer out of the draft. But even still, it's the difference.
I'm so glad though.
In flavor, yeah. Yeah, it was wild. And, even to this
You had-
day, I mean,
You had that epiphany.
totally. And even to this day, I think I cook with more beer than, almost any chef that I know. One of my specialties is mac and cheese, and you can bet that any mac and cheese I ever make is going to be made with beer specifically. So, so yeah, that was cool. And then I went off to culinary school, and I like to describe CIA as not just culinary, but it's hospitality, in a really rounded way. And, it was at that point, and, now I'm 19, 20 years old. I started having this relationship with beverage from a chef's perspective, in addition to the relationship I have with it from a consumer's perspective. And at that age, my consumer's perspective of beverage was drinking Yingling and Lion's Head. And if we were feeling fancy, it was going to be Stegmeyer. And we would do it out of a hose connected to a keg, and somebody is holding my legs up. And so that's the relationship that I have from the consumer side, But I'm also thinking about this from the chef's perspective, that when I'm trying a beer, even when it's, something, less complex like Yingling, I'm closing my eyes and thinking about, what type of malt am I tasting? What am I feeling? And it was also around that time, when I was a culinary student, that I just decided I didn't want to specialize in anything. I wasn't going to pursue one type of cuisine and be one specific kind of chef. I was so addicted to the culinary and hospitality industry as a whole that I was like, I just want to learn everything. I want to learn food. I want to learn beverage. I want to learn business. And so, I started pursuing both wine and beer and cocktails. And right after I graduated school, I went back to my externship site, Stein Eriksen Lodge in Park City, Utah. And I took a job as a server in their dining room. And I was really young, but that was a really amazing opportunity for me to, really dive deep into wine lists and cocktails and beer. And I'm thinking about this from the perspective of a service person in a dining room, that not only do I need to help guests choose the beverage that they're going to be drinking, I really need to know what these beverages are. And so I started studying the wine list and the amazing craft beer list that Utah has, and as well as cocktails. And so I'm kind of, simultaneously learning all of these things together. And I continued cooking for sure. I spent 3 summers cooking at a really amazing hotel property on Nantucket, and then winters working in Park City, Utah, with one kind of break and a stint that I did up in Vermont as well. And I got to explore that really incredible world of beer. And then in 2015, I decided, I was like, all right, well, I'm going to get really serious again about beverage. And so I took my level 1 sommelier exam and my level 1 Cicerone exam within 2 weeks of each other. And so it was like
Excellent.
the 6 months, leading up to that was just nothing but immersed in wine and beer. And so it's kind of been like cyclical in that sense, where I'll get really, really into something just because I want to learn it and get better at it. And I won't necessarily master that knowledge, but if it's part of our industry, I want to know it. And there's that sense of studying. And then there's one other point that I'll touch on that was really formative in my career that relates to beer itself, is that right at that time in 2015, 16, I ended up getting a call from a friend of a friend. And it was a company that they did German imported food products. And so they had kicked off in relationship to the Hofbrauhaus franchise when Vegas opened. And then you have, Cleveland and Pittsburgh and all of these Hofbrauhaus locations here in the United States. And although they have amazing culinary programs, they also import a lot of products from Germany for the authenticity. And one of those things that they were importing were the Bavarian soft pretzels that are made in Munich by Pillar Bakery, the legendary Aussie Pillar. And so they were actually importing their Bavarian soft pretzels to the United States because they couldn't find anything else like those here. And so I was recruited to be the manager of Northeast sales for this company, Prop Impeller Pretzels. And at first I was like, why would I do that? I know I'm a chef. I don't want to start into a German pretzel business, nor do I even want to be in sales. But, again, I'm 25 years old, and the salary was pretty cool, and they offered a car and health insurance and a cell phone. And I was like, all right, cool. I'll do this for a little while. It was just going to be a 1-year job. And so with that, my job is to be out there and to be promoting these German imported products, and specifically Bavarian craft pretzels, to restaurants, gastropubs, tap rooms, and breweries. The the type of places that would be selling Bavarian craft pretzels. And, I'm sure that you've been to a brewery where you see a giant pretzel hanging on a banana hanger as it comes to your table. That was our company that developed
Absolutely.
that. There's been a couple of copies.
That's incredible.
I wasn't the one personally, but that was like the company I worked for, that we were the first people to do that concept. And so what was cool is I got to drive around, all of the northeastern part of the country, as well as work on some national accounts. And so even airplane travel. And, I'd be walking into these breweries with the intention of, talking about the pretzels, but the first person I would be meeting with is either the chef or the owner or the brewer. And I would get to go right in the back door, and we would sit and we'd try the pretzels for, 5 minutes, and they were so good. They just spoke for themselves. And like the sale itself was easy, but it was me provoking these conversations with not only the brewers to learn more about their beer, of course, taste those beers, but also with the chefs, to talk more about, how are you thinking about beer from a chef's perspective? What are you doing to pair your food with beer? What are you doing to cook with beer? And so that became a really, really formative time in my relationship with food and beer together. And so I worked for them for 4 years, and it was an incredible experience and opportunity. Still like the people who I met working there are like family to me to this day. And shout out to Claudia Hillmeyer for being the pioneer of the German Bavarian soft pretzels in the United States, and helping to bring that to what it is.
Damn, I
and yeah,
want
so
right
that's
now.
Yeah, me too.
I should have prepped some for you.
Oh, David, what a history in beer and food together. So I love it that our guest chef has done a keg stand for this show. And, shout out to whatever it was, Bud Light, whatever beer, just imagine if that had been like an Allagash White or a Belgian wit that your one of your mentors there had steamed with mussels and clams and whatnot. But I think it almost doesn't matter, because it ultimately would have led you to what you're doing now. I love it that you understand all sides of service, of hospitality, and how beer plays a role in that. And I love that you're investing in beer pairing and in beer dinners. This was maybe kind of more of a trend 10 years ago, when I was working in beer in New York City. And the feedback ever since has been like, it's too expensive, it's too complicated, it's too risky. And I don't see nearly as many beer dinners happening today, beer pairings with food happening today. So the fact, again, that you're making that investment and promoting it, and it's a big part of your story, is amazing. Two extremely quick anecdotes I'm just going to share with you both, because I think they're relevant here. Just speaking about working in beer in New York like a decade ago at this point, I was with 6 Point Brewery out of Brooklyn, which became a large brand that was eventually outsourced and contract brewed. But their roots in Red Hook, Brooklyn, walking into, I visited Moonlight many times, Brian, and it reminds me of when I first visited 6 Point in Red Hook when I was being interviewed, because you saw a system that had initially been cobbled together by whatever resources and materials were available, and everything was brewed by hand to taste. They didn't have extensive equipment. They didn't have extensive resources. There really weren't even rakes in the mash tun. They did it all by hand, and it was hard, heavy, hot labor. And I see that, a lot of what Moonlight does to present day is by hand to taste. It is a very human process, and it reminded me of those similar roots at 6 Point when I first met them. And I was doing sales for years for them. David, I'm glad you also have some sales in your background in the pretzel business. And at one point I noticed Gramercy Tavern was buying 6 Point Crisp, our house lager. And it wasn't available at the bar. It was high profile. Gramercy Tavern is one of my favorite restaurants in New York City. I always sit at the bar. That menu and that experience cannot be beat. But Crisp wasn't available. And I thought it was a little bit of an odd choice, because they really kind of tried to pride themselves on beers associated with the absolute highest quality or maybe exclusivity around them. So I found out that Crisp was actually being served as a shift beer in the back to the kitchen crew, to the chefs on hand. And I kind of realized, oh, you know what? Like, there's maybe not the same presentation and spectacle around crisp as you might get what's on the menu in the front, but this is what the staff and the crew in the back are drinking because they just need a light, refreshing beer. So it kind of made me understand and appreciate how lager is both the drink of like hard work and heavy labor, and also, you know, that it has its place both front of house and in the back of the kitchen. So we'll talk more about this as well. But thank you both for sharing your stories, sharing your history. I want to get to present day. I want to talk about Moonlight since 1992. I want to talk about how Camber and Brunch Boys evolved and developed from your past experiences, David. Brian, you started to touch on this before, but yes, you make. We'll call them core. We'll call them year round. We'll call them flagship. But they can ultimately be known by nothing other than Death and Taxes and Reality Check. So I am just kind of curious, because this is a show about lager beer. Has lager been part of your mission, part of your vision from the very beginning? I'd like you to speak to how unusual it might have been circa 1992 for a small craft microbrewery to be making a substantial investment in lager, in extended cold conditioning, in having the cellar that I saw recently that you do. Was lager always part of the plan? How did you decide to make that investment? Have Death and Taxes been available? Has Death and Taxes and Reality Check essentially been available year round from the very beginning? And then let's also talk a little bit to all the seasonal and all the one-off lagers you do as well. But yeah, tell us about Moonlight, please.
Boy, that's a lot of questions to see if I can answer and remember them all.
Yeah, do what you can. Share what you want.
You know, it's funny. Michael Lewis was British. He was actually from Wales, but you know, he taught us all about lagers, in part because nearly all of us in the program were going to get hired by Anheuser-Busch. I didn't so much like the authority of Anheuser-Busch, and I went a little sideways and worked for Schlitz. But still, I appreciated lagers. But then again, I also, right out of school, I got a chance to, actually, just after Schlitz, got a chance to go to the Great British Beer Festival.
Oh.
And boy, I fell in love with cask ale and real ale. Oh, and I just love all aspects of beer. And David, kind of like you said, I like all different aspects of what beer can do. Whether it's a lager or an ale or cask beer or whatnot. So the job I had before Moonlight was working at what's now called Downtown Joe's. It was then called Willet's Brewing Company. And it was only ales. And I decided when I opened Moonlight, I wanted to have something clearly different. And I said, all right, I'm going to use a lager yeast. And my first yeast came from Capital Brewery in Madison, Wisconsin.
Oh.
And I sent back a keg, sterilized keg in a cooler, and they filled it and FedExed it back to me. And that was my first pitch of lager yeast.
Incredible.
And I just love what lagers can do. Granted, I love what ales can do too.
Yes.
But lagers have just another tease to them that makes you, sorry, it's just like this. Even just thinking about it, you just want that. Oh, you crave that, and I love that craving. So for the lagers, I started with Death and Taxes and a light one that had a few different names, a light lager, and then the Twist of Fate amber or bitter ale at that time. Those are the three beers I started with Moonlight. And then I went to Munich and to Prague in 2001. And I fell in love with the beers in Pilsen and Prague. And either I had to move there or make a true Pilsen. And moving there had some complications. So it's not rocket science to know how to make a good Pilsner. And so did I mention the water?
Yeah.
That's how you make a Pilsner beer. You make the right water, and then everything else falls into place. So I learned how to make a Pilsner, and that's how Reality Check started. And my first name for the beer was Reality Check. And then I kind of went, I kicked it around. I don't know if you want a reality check. Sometimes that's exactly what you don't want. And I almost went with Black Market Pills, except then people had expected to be a dark beer. And I finally came around to, well, damn it, whose version of what a reality check is? Clever. And so I came back to Reality Check, and I'm glad I kept that name. But I didn't go with the traditional ingredients exactly, because I wasn't trying to copy a Czech Pils. I wanted to taste relevant to the West Coast. So I used some American hops and some European hops and some European barley and some American barley to just try to straddle that and fit into both worlds. Had a little European edge on the West Coast and a West Coast edge on the European world. And damn, I think it worked.
Whoa. Divine inspiration. I can see the love on your face and hear it in your voice when you speak about visiting Germany, visiting Czech Republic or Czechia. I'm glad you just decided to take that inspiration home instead of ultimately moving there and just kind of treat the local municipal water supply to make it. So Death and Taxes, Reality Check, by any name, these have been part of Moonlight's brewing story from the very beginning. And I'm just kind of curious, in 1992, it would have been so much easier to open up an ale-centric brewery, to start turning around pale ales, porters, stouts. You did mention doing a red ale, and then ultimately IPAs. Just what was the challenge in terms of kind of getting both the equipment, the space, and the cold storage, the cold conditioning to make lager beer year round? Like, was that incredibly unusual for the time? What challenge did you face doing it, and why did you ultimately decide to persevere with it?
I don't seem to do anything the easy way. And I do love a challenge. And, part of that is you want a professional challenge. And I wanted to do more than I had been doing of ales. If anybody was going to make a lager, if anybody was going to, well, why wouldn't it be me? So it's not rocket science. You just get a bunch of tanks and refrigeration. And I first was aging in a refrigerated shipping container and in Grundies, 7-barrel Grundies. And because they were cheap at the time, I got them for about $1,000. Actually, I got them for a couple $100 and then modified them and ended up costing me $1,000 because I took the tanks, changed the drains and put them on their sides for better aging for lagers. And I had a whole shipping container with a dozen of these on their sides. Oh, it's just so perfect. And, I changed the processes as time permitted and as equipment permitted and money permitted. But you mentioned the love of beer. I love beer and seems to love me back. But,
yes. Beer loves us all and wants us to be happy.
And we love that you love beer.
And
it's
any change I do in the brewery, part of that is you've got to always make it better, strive to be better. And so I had to make lagers.
Yeah.
There was just no way around it. And, equipment is just equipment. You can always I love engineering stuff, figuring out how to make stuff. I'm not a welder, but I know welders that also like beer. So, there's ways to make things like that work.
Well, this ain't no factory beer. Here's to doing it the hard way. I love that also your lager yeast was originally sourced from Capital Brewing. I've never had their beer and didn't understand how long exactly they've been around, but they are routinely cited for German styles, European styles of lager that might not regularly be available in the United States. And I'm just glad
if you're in Wisconsin, it's not really an ale sort of state.
Also true.
Not sure Pennsylvania's an ale sort of state, although I do remember having Yuengling Porter very early in my life and going, wow, that's
likewise. Likewise, and yeah, David, we got to say no shame in Yingling, and that is a part of, I think, all of our stories and all of our history in beer. But yeah, speaking to that Benjamin Franklin misquote that beer is proof that God loves us and wants us to be happy. It's really funny that he originally cited wine for that, but it's the beer that is taken off, and that's what people attribute it to, because beer loves us and wants us to be happy.
Well, there's a quote in the Bible about Jesus changing water into wine. But if
Yes,
you look a little historically, you see grapes weren't around that area at that time.
interesting.
Their alcohol was a grain base. Basically, they drank beer. They didn't have grapes. So would Jesus have turned water into wine? Well, the answer is when you translate it from a few different languages. When it was in the Roman world, the cool people drank wine in the Roman era, and the boring laborers drank beer. So you wouldn't have Jesus, make a lower class beverage.
Yeah.
And so wine was how that translated. So, things like that happen. They get mistranslated.
Well, here's to a little bit of historical reinterpretation. Beer was one of the original mysteries, one of the original miracles, and continues to be so to present day. David, moving right along, can you also tell us a little bit about what makes Camber unique, what makes Camber distinct, as well as your brunch pop-up, the Brunch Boys? Tell us a little bit just about your process. Tell us about how you work. Tell us what it's like behind the scenes that ultimately leads you to make an investment in beer, decide to do a series of beer pairing dinners. Just tell us a little bit about Camber and Brunch Boys behind the scenes, and tell us what you like to cook for yourself at home, for that matter.
Oh boy, those are all great questions. So the order of how that happened was Brunch Boys was formed first. So when I moved out here to California in 2020, I came here with the intention of doing something that I had never done, which was to work at a 3 Michelin star restaurant, one of the top restaurants in the world. And so that's the reason that I first moved out here. And I had applied to the one that I wanted to get into to work in the kitchen. And I was deep in COVID, and they didn't have any positions, and they ended up posting a position for their dining room, and so I applied to that, and I got the position in the dining room, and I spent about 3.5 years working at one of the few 3 Michelin star restaurants in the United States, right up here in Healdsburg. And then during that time as well, I started doing private chef work, and that's something I've done since I was in my early 20s. In the different states or places that I've lived, I've always done private chef dining. It's kind of easy and low overhead, and so I'm working at the restaurant and I'm doing that, and then simultaneously I also had become roommates with my my best friend from culinary school, and he was working as a winery chef, and I was doing my thing, and I went to him and I said, hey, we should do a pop-up. It's kind of it's a popular thing, and people respond well to it. And he's like, all right, cool. Like, what would we do? And I said, well, what if we did a brunch pop-up, specifically biscuits and gravy? I have a really good sausage gravy recipe, and you make buttermilk biscuits. And he's like, yeah, okay, let's try that. And so right then and there, we said, we'll call it Brunch Boys. Even though this was supposed to be a tiny side project, we didn't want to, get in trouble doing anything. And so before we even started, we set up an LLC and got a catering permit and all of the licensing and insurance and everything. And we were approaching some venues about who might want to do this biscuits and gravy pop-up, and didn't get anywhere. And so a wine bar friend of ours, the people who own a wine bar who are really good friends of ours, said, yeah, why don't you come in and do a pop-up here? But it was late night on the weekends. And so our first pop-up was a artisan grilled cheese and soup pop-up in December of 2023. And so
Nice.
We kind of had this brand that started to get up and running. And Brunch Boys was not necessarily known for brunch. And it's funny because Brunch Boys, even to this day, is not known for brunch food. We rarely do brunch pop-ups, but it's very much like a gastro pub, modern. We say that we're fancy street food, if you will, with Brunch Boys. But throughout early 2024, we were getting inquiries, for this kind of hybrid of very fine dining private chef work and then Brunch Boys catering. And then we found ourselves doing, more high level events on a larger scale. And in the summer of 24, we were looking at this opportunity and we said, well, what do we want to do with this? We're growing out this catering business that we started from literally zero with no investment, and we're growing it with more equipment and more people and more resources. And so we said, well, let's rebrand, and we created the brand Camber, which was really meaningful in the sense of what we called it and why we called it. And so, Camber over the last, year, as this brand has been picking up, we do a lot of different things where we say that by structure, we are a catering company, but we don't want to be limited to specifically catering. So we say that we're a culinary partner. And what has really helped drive that growth is that, we are so deeply personalizing our experiences to the guests and the people that we're serving. And I know that every caterer out there says, "Oh, we personalize to you." But when we're having conversations with whether it be private clients or corporate clients for large dinners, small dinners, we're asking these questions of like, what does food mean to you? What are personal connections that you have, maybe memories from your childhood about food? And we're curating these custom experiences, not just through the food, but maybe through the design or the decoration or the architecture around the dinner. And with that, we're creating experiences and memories that people walk away with and is super, super special. But we also don't want to be limited to just that. We're so hungry to continue growing off in all of these different directions. And so we decided we wanted to start a ticketed dinner series, an event that we produce ourselves rather than just being hired by somebody else. And, there's not a plan to just limit it to one thing either. We actually have two different dinner series that we're launching right now, one being the Elegance of Beer and then another one called Momentum. But we're looking at where we are in wine country. We said, we work with wineries all across this area. We're doing winemaker dinners 4 to 5 times a month. But, chefs here are not thinking about beer from the fine dining sense. And as part of the ethos of Camber is that we want to, not make it about ourselves. We want to make it about our guests, but we also want to be able to tell the story about those in the background, those who are producing the things that we're serving. And so, of course, we work with a lot of local farms. So we know the people who are growing our food and where that food comes from. But, when you think about beer, the brewer is just as much genius as the winemaker, and the wine is so closely integrated into fine dining cuisine, but the beer oftentimes becomes the backdrop. And so because winemaker dinners happen here in Northern California and wine country so regularly, we said, why don't we do something different and think about beer from that fine dining perspective? And I hadn't had a relationship with Brian per se, or really Moonlight Brewing as a whole, with the exception of when I first came here, I tried Death and Taxes because somebody told me you need to try Death and Taxes. And I remember this emotional epiphany that I had trying Death and Taxes for the first time. And I was like, oh my God, this is so incredible and complex and unique and of course, elegant. And so I had already been following this brewery for quite a while. And so as the idea was coming to life, I knew, I said it had to be Moonlight that we partnered up with. And so I sent a text to somebody that I didn't even know at Moonlight. And I told him about this idea. And it was just, I think it was like a 1-word answer. And that was from Barry. And he was like, we're in. And I'm like, yes. All right, let's do this. And so it's been growing from there. And Adam, I'm not sure how much we should share here about, what to expect from the very first Elegance of Beer dinner that's coming up. But the team that's going to be involved in this, both the culinary team and the dining room, have experience working literally in restaurants that have been on the top lists in the world, 3 Michelin stars. So we're pulling out all of the stops, and not just in the techniques and the service, but also the ingredients that we're pulling in that are also going to be featuring local farms and local producers, local artisans that could, involve their plateware or their serviceware as part of this. So it's something that, it's taken a little bit of time to get the word out and get the buzz going, but I will say that I feel bad for anybody who's going to miss out on this dining experience because of what is going into this as the menu is coming together and the beer pairings. It's something that I recommend that if you have time and the date available, you should come to Elegance of Beer.
And if you're hungry and or thirsty.
Yeah,
absolutely, of course.
I mean, we all love good beer, we all love good food, and we love them even more together. I'm really curious, David, was there any moment, any particular feedback from like one of your suppliers or any of your customers or clients that said like, why don't you do this with beer? Or was it all kind of internally among your team, among your chefs collective, that you're seeing wine dinners happening and there's an appreciation for beer within you? So it's like, well, why isn't someone doing this with beer? Why don't we do this with beer? What led to that moment?
Yeah, I think that you just explained part of it, is that, wine is so prevalent here. And so we have these amazing breweries like Moonlight and geniuses like Brian that they should certainly be featured. But again, I just spent, almost 4 years working in the dining room at one of the greatest restaurants in the world. And one of those things that I took away is that, beer, as we know, becomes so secondary to wine programs, especially in that fine dining world. So I think that there's this sense of a balance where restaurants with great beer lists are usually the restaurants that are the most casual or contemporary and are not focusing on fine dining. And as that sense of fine dining in the kitchen, as that becomes more elevated, the beer programs are less focused on, just because the structure of wine. We know that wine and great wine lists are what go better with amazing food, but is that necessarily true? And so, I think that even though great restaurants 9 times out of 10 are going to bring in amazing beers, that list of beers might only be 4 to 5 different options, and it's in a small part of that beverage list, way in the back after your 50 pages of great wines. And as you taste through these beers, I've had several revelations, comparing beers and wines together, where wine has its own sense of complexity and acid and body and balance. But you get through that and it kind of stops, where beer almost offers like this bonus of, effervescence and malt when it still carries acidity and brightness and freshness. And, I feel that the beer oftentimes becomes forgotten in that fine dining sense, especially when we're talking about pairing it with great cuisine. And so that's just what we want to do. I think it's almost like the sense of like bringing awareness to the general public in a way of saying, look at this and look what it can do, because I feel like we're missing out on this opportunity for this experience.
I love it. Again, I can see just the passion on your face. I can hear the love in your voice as I did with Brian's. You know what? I want to thank you for stepping into, I'm not going to say it's hostile territory here, but you were talking to beer nerds, you're talking to beer geeks, you're talking to beer lovers, hosting this show, participating in this show, listening to this show, and giving that nod and that wink to the beer industry and to craft beer within fine dining. It means a lot to me, because when I was hustling around New York City, selling beer, I mean, going into 11 Madison Park, going into Blue Hill, these kind of operations at the time, their buyers, their wine program always dominated. It always led the way, but their buyers were so intrigued and so refreshed and so excited to talk about beer and its potential at their restaurants. And yes, they loved having like the Cantillon off menu or something like that to surprise and delight whoever might ask for it. Beer absolutely has a place in finer dining. I'm not going to beat this over the head or preach to the choir, but I always reach for it over wine. I think it's infinitely more versatile and can meet the moment for any given meal, and shouldn't just be relegated to burgers and pizza. There's a beer for every moment, there's a beer for every occasion, and there's a beer for every cuisine. Real quick, amen. Let us pray. But before we, not so shamelessly, but also significantly plug the Elegance of Beer dinner, I think we just have to speak to Santa Rosa, to Sonoma County. You both live in and around Santa Rosa and Sonoma. You call this home. I'm nearby, and I've got to tell you how much I appreciate just how unique this part of the world is. But can you take us on your drive to work? Take us on like some of your favorite stops around Santa Rosa, around Sonoma. Tell us why it is this region and this part of California that yields so many great products in terms of eating and drinking, whether we're talking about beer, whether we're talking about wine, whether we're talking about cheese, whether we're talking about grain, fruits and vegetables. Just tell us, what is it about this place that has led Moonlight to shine and thrive since 1992, not to mention all the other great breweries around Sonoma and within Santa Rosa? And what is it about this place that also leads a private chef collective to build a series around pairing local cuisine with local wines, with local food, with local beer, excuse me. I know this is another big and very loaded question, but what makes Santa Rosa and Sonoma County so special to you both? Starting with you, Brian, and then by all means, preach to the choir, David. What makes Santa Rosa and Sonoma so special?
I hate to plug the wine business, but frankly, they're part of it. And they're part of it in the sense that how many people in Sonoma County, and there's that other county east of us, how many people in Sonoma County work in the wine business where what you do every day is about sensory, olfactory, taste, smell, and that you have to be conscious of that, and you have to care about something that smells better or tastes better. Whereas if you go some places, I grew up in Sacramento, you want to get fed and you want to get liquored up. But here we care more about what it tastes like, in part because that's people's job, but also you've got fresh produce and you have creative chefs and you have all the things that make you care. And you have a little bit from, let's say, the winery employees that care about taste. And that brings chef employees, restaurant employees that care about taste. It's not just Caro's restaurants around here, if they still exist. And all this builds that you have then farmers that care about what they're creating instead of just mass producing things. And meat producers, all these people find a place where the people around them care what things taste like. And it's hard to imagine, but a lot of the world is not like that. I remember being in Milwaukee and trying to find lettuce. I would pay a phenomenal number of dollars for a head of romaine and people look at me like, wow, you're paying a lot for that, because everybody else was buying iceberg. But I wanted to actually taste it. And that's something around here. People actually care what things taste like.
Yeah.
That's it. Where that comes from exactly, it kind of just builds organically.
Well said. We're all arguably in kind of some form of sales or marketing at the end of the day. I know I certainly am. But one thing I appreciate most about the North Bay area, about Santa Rosa, about Sonoma, it's not like a chain heavy big box retail kind of environment. I mean, the further north you drive, the further into the country you get. But Santa Rosa, Sonoma, they have all their own answers to whatever you might want, whatever you might need, whatever you might crave, but it's typically not on a corporate level. It's typically not a chain. Like you said, people seem to really care about taste and take a lot of pride in where they live, and try to develop that locally and regionally as an offering to whatever your taste is, to whatever your craving is, because it matters. It matters arguably more than anything.
And it's not just like, I want to pay more for it.
Yeah.
Because
not at all. And you don't have to.
Perhaps a little east of us. It's about legitimately wanting something that tastes better and knowing the difference and recognizing a difference. caring that there is a difference and wanting that difference.
I love so there's a healthy appreciation for the wine industry we're hearing from Brian, and it's a little bit of shade to the county or the region east of us that shall remain nameless. That's hilarious. And I'm sure, David, you probably feel much the same way, but this is where you've chosen to call home. I mean, I'm from Dallas, Texas. You're from Dallas, Pennsylvania, and we've both somehow found our way here. Just what, again, is it about Santa Rosa, Healdsburg, Sonoma County that allows you, to create a private chef collective to build a series of beer pairing dinners with elevated cuisine? What is it about the place and the people that you think makes for an audience here, makes for a welcoming, makes for an invitation?
Yeah, I mean, I think Brian hit the nail on the head, and I don't know how I'm going to add much more to that. But coming up as a chef throughout my career, living in other places, I was always curious about Northern California. I had never been here when I moved here in 2020, but what always sparked my curiosity is that when we were buying produce from our broadline distributors, which in my world, I was just trained that this is where food came from, which was like log into your computer, order it, and it shows up on a truck the next day. It all came from California. And I always had this interest in why does food come from California? And so, I moved here with the understanding that the San Francisco Bay Area as a whole has the largest collection of Michelin stars of anywhere else in the country. So I pursued specifically furthering my own career, but also with the knowledge that both Sonoma and the other county to the east, the reason that we grow wine here is because the climate is the greatest climate in the country, if not almost in the world, to grow things, to grow grapes, but grow any type of food. And so not only was I pursuing this furthering of my education and my career, but also to be able to connect with that in that sense from a chef's perspective of what is coming from the land itself. One of those interesting things that I learned is that the produces that are grown here that are shipped outside of California are typically the produces that they don't want to keep here in California. And so the really, really good ingredients that are grown here by farmers are the best ones, are the ones that are available to us. And so after living here for just about 5 years, I mean, I feel like I've created such a connection with the terroir of this place, creating relationships with the farmers, understanding what they're growing, when in the season they're growing these things, and why they're growing them. And now, I have trouble eating tomatoes in the wintertime because I almost inherently know that tomatoes are only available in the summer. And that's when they come to us, and that's when they're here. And so I almost find this like disconnect with foods that are not local, or I don't know exactly where it's coming from. And so I think from a chef's perspective, that creates this amazing avenue and platform to be able to stand on and share this sense of place and time and community with the people that we're cooking for and that we serve. And therefore, the people who are behind the scenes, the growers and the artisans, the brewers and the producers, they become this really amazing part of your story as a professional chef. And so, as I've been discovering this, I've continuously wanted to pursue it, chase that sense of knowing exactly where my food is coming from, and then giving the people who I serve the opportunity to also know that. I feel that, we as humans, we just have a right to know where our food is coming from. And the chef is kind of that caveat in that sense to be able to share and tell that story. But to answer the second part of your question, the chefs and restaurants, I find they have relationships with the wineries and they have relationships with the brewers, but it's almost like there's two separate islands of the brewers community and the wine community. And there's not a whole lot of overlap in that sense. I'm sure there's friendships and conversations that happen, especially with the overlap in fermentation.
The overlap is the winemakers come drink here at the brewery.
Perhaps, yeah. But also the winemakers are drinking your beer while making the wine type of thing. But
also true.
I hope that there's this sense of kind of education and being able to open people's eyes about the beauty and, of course, hashtag the elegance of beer, when we're trying to share this overarching story of why Sonoma County is such an amazing place. Because, as Brian said, the people who are here really care about flavors, and I think they're adventurous. They're interested to see and try new things from a culinary and a beverage perspective.
I'm really glad you said that last sentence, because there's more creativity perhaps on the coast where you have all these other influences. If you're not influenced by other cultures and other types of food, then you're more locked in. And like you talked about the original French cooking in French restaurants. I love French food, don't get me wrong. But I also love years ago when they came up with California cuisine. What was that? Well, that was before there was the word fusion. It was basically whatever makes sense, but it's going to taste good and work in this climate, and not limited by anything that was in some previously written cookbook.
Yes.
And that creativity allows the craft beers we have today, and allows the kind of cooking perhaps that you're doing that may not be straight from a French cookbook.
Yes. I love everything you both are saying.
Yeah.
Let's say, know thy brewer, know thy chef, know what you're eating, know what you're drinking. Let your local brewer, your local brewery, your local chef, your local restaurant be a conduit to that, a guide to that, an explanation of it, and a celebration of it. I love it. This is one more thing I want to touch upon, just as a joint question to you both, because, David, in particular, you've spoken to hospitality. You've spoken to the service element around all your work. Brian, I love the experience at the Moonlight tap room. You always have something new and fun and different to offer, whether it's a food truck, whether it's trivia, whether it's live music. And then, of course, speaking to the beer on the board, we talked about how Death and Taxes, reality check, as well as your IPA, Bombay by Bo. These are typically always available year round, but there's always something else to surprise and delight. And within the context of lager, I don't even know where to begin, but a multitude of dark lagers, black lagers, which are my absolute favorite, Italian Pilsner, Japanese inspired Pilsner, New Zealand inspired Pilsner, a variety of different Czech and German inspired Pilsners. There's Paternal Instinct, a dry hop Pilsner, particularly meaningful to me since I, as of now, have a 7-month-old daughter at home. There's no shortage of opportunity and offerings when you visit Moonlight. So can you tell us just a little bit more? Oh, toast. I'm not going to forget about that one either. There's a lager you essentially age, an amber lager, for an entire year. I've never had it before, but I will this year, that you then release. It's brewed in January and then released come like December, January. For reality check, there's now a 14 Plato to celebrate the holiday season. So much to celebrate. So I just want you to tell us a little bit about what you want customers, consumers, fans, and friends to experience at your tap room, to take home with them, to take away with them from the taproom experience. And then here again, David, can you just talk a little bit about how significant the service and the hospitality element is for you, for your chef's collective, and for your crew, for anyone who happens to join you for dining? Take it away, Brian, please.
The toast is one that people make Christmas ales and things like that. But a great time to celebrate is also New Year's. And I do love champagne. Don't get me wrong.
Yes.
I do confess to drinking other wine as well.
You heard it here.
I like the idea of toast. And I like the idea of, throwing toast. And why not have a beer that is for New Year's, which is a great time to celebrate? And it's toast. Because that's what you do at New Year's is toast. And why not have it taste like toast? Because, let's be consistent.
Yes.
Well, the beer is specifically designed to taste like toast and to be used for toast. And it's a little bit of the previous year since it's made in January and released in time for New Year's at the end of December. So it kind of spans all the things that happen in the year and looking forward to the next new year. Because a little tying into your next question for David, it's not just about the creativity and the fun of the drink and the taste and the flavors and how it makes you feel. It is the whole experience of it, how it's presented to you, how it makes you feel. Just like your culinary experience, and beer is culinary, it's got to work. It's got to all work and make you feel like, I'm so glad I went out tonight and had that fun time. And I'm so glad I went to that beer dinner with Camber and Moonlight, which I hope sometime you'll mention how to get tickets for that.
Oh, it's coming.
We will.
But when you come to Moonlight, you'll see the creativity. It's always something new. I don't even know all the things that show up on that board. I'll walk in and go, I've never heard of that one before. And Zach will just have an idea in his head. And Zach has an amazing sense of flavor and taste. And that's why I chose to hire him, is because he's got this twisted sense of being able to take something in your head and turn it into a beverage.
Nice.
And just like as a chef, you have either you read what it is in the book and you do exactly that, or you go off script. And the off script stuff is what I always want, except for when I want the regular things. But,
Yes.
but you're going to get off script when you come to Moonlight, and you're going to get the regulars. And you never know what you're going to get. But I guarantee it will be fucking good.
I love it. Yeah. You're basically giving people a reason to get out of the house, to go somewhere after work, to get off their phones and go out for an experience, go out for a sense of community, go out for a sense of surprise. And I hear what you're saying. You'll find that on the board in the tap list at Moonlight. You can get a standard CO2 pour or the treat of a Lucre faucet. There's trivia, there's music, there's food trucks. I think that's every reason to get out and about. If you Google
That's
Moonlight,
not every reason. You didn't mention that we also have cask ale.
cask ale as well.
So, like, what is that? What more do we not have?
Yeah, going
No, we
back
don't
to
have
your
sour
roots.
beers. Okay, there's that.
But still, you know what's funny? If you Google Moonlight and if you look at like some of the Yelp reviews, which I'm just guessing you don't give a fuck about, it'll say it has a steampunk kind of ambiance and atmosphere, a steampunk vibe. I don't know if that means anything to you or was at all intentional from the start, but to me, that's just an expression of how unique. I mean, this is since your brewery's been in operation since '92, we have seen a shift in like tap rooms now. They need to be more designed, more curated, more developed. I love it that you're still giving people a reason to drive into like an old school industrial park, to maybe get lost or knock on the wrong door along the way, and then be surprised and delighted when they find Moonlight, see who's there, see what's there, when they find what's waiting for them. I think that's wonderful.
And once you get here, we'll try to get you lost again.
That's a promise. That's a promise. David, and to you as well. And then we're going to move right along to the elegance of beer dinner. But you've spoken to service, you've spoken to hospitality many times. Whether you're going to a tap room or a beer festival, or whether you're going to a restaurant, there is nothing worse than being greeted by whoever it is, a host, a server, a bartender, anyone working on site that just doesn't give a fuck anymore. And whatever their reason might be, that lack of enthusiasm will be the first thing that kills your enthusiasm. That lack of caring will be the first thing that kills whether you care or not. So just tell us a little bit about hospitality and service in your role as chef among the Camber team and among the brunch boys. And then let's talk about this elegance of beer dinner.
And Brian certainly set me up for, I think the most important phrase in hospitality is that, people don't remember what you say and what you do, but they're going to remember how you made them feel. And, I think that there's a couple of different sides of the service aspect. And you also need to think about it in the sense of what is the place for that service. And so, talking about a place like Moonlight, if I go and I sit down at the bar at Moonlight Brewing, I'm not expecting the person behind that bar to be wearing a tuxedo and to be, serving me from the left or from the right. Johnny is an awesome dude, but it's like, I don't expect that from him, so there's kind of this certain expectation. But what I appreciate every time I go into the Moonlight tap room is that, there is this sense of warmth and welcoming, and everybody that works for Brian, whether it's in the tap room or it's in production, just loves what they do. They love being there, and they certainly care. And, for my years in hospitality, I think that I've become so in tune with that. When I go into an establishment, I can just feel right away. It's like, you don't even want to work here. You're just here because this is your job while you're working on a different career. And it translates into the experience that you have. And because when I go to Moonlight, I'm always like sitting down looking for an educational experience. I want to try something and I want to see what the process is or how it's tasting, or, if the milk pour really does make a difference, which it absolutely does. And Moonlight is always willing to give me that experience and talk as much as I want to talk about those nuances or, of course, the elegance of beer. And then as you work your way up to these dining rooms that are at the top tier of our industry, the things that separate the great service teams from the not great service teams are really just about the details that they put into it, as well as the teamwork. And so I think that there's this foundational structure that you have to have when we're talking about, say, beer or any beverage. Of course, the beer has to be in the appropriate glass. It has to be poured perfectly every time. So that's your mechanics that, if you can't master that, then you can't then move on to those next steps. And then, of course, working as a team together, identifying what type of experience your guests want to have, and then capitalizing on that, constantly going above and beyond for your guests and trying to make them feel a certain way that really reflects hospitality. I think that is what service means. Will Guidara said it best in his book, Unreasonable Hospitality, is that service is in black and white, hospitality is in color. And so throughout my career, I've worked about 30% of my career in dining rooms and on service teams, and it gives me a unique perspective from the culinary side. And therefore, within Camber as an organization, I'm the chef of the event, as well as the the service manager. I'll bring in a service team to execute the dining room responsibilities, but I won't hire a dining room manager. I will oversee both. And it gives me the full control to make sure that things are done exactly the way that I want them to be done. And that hospitality is provided in a way that the guests are walking away with this feeling of amazement and fulfillment. So,
yeah.
Like
Again, very well said. It's just interesting to hear how a brewery co-owner, co-founder, a chef, co-owner, co-founder can have so much in common when it comes to the experience they like to share with fans, with customers, with people, with humans. The emphasis on hospitality.
We're all about delight,
service.
creating delight.
Yeah. Here's to delight. David, I'm going to say this real quick. I've only worked in a restaurant. It was actually a brew pub once in my life. It was the brewery at Abigail in Hermosa Beach. It was run by Brian Brewer, who now has a hand in Hop Saint around Torrance in Southern California. Brilliant brewer and brilliant brewery. I worked as a busboy and a food runner. Really for sake of exploring opportunity and potential in beer. This was the first time it ever occurred to me I might somehow be able to work in beer. I just didn't know how yet. And it was so I could help out on brew days and just lend a hand and learn the basics and see the fundamentals of how beer is made. In so doing, it changed the course of my life. But I learned very quickly I was no good as a busboy. I was no good as a food runner. It was
well, you're going to have to be working a dining room pretty soon on July 30th.
We'll see if my skills have shaped or improved at all. I learned it was unfair to anyone dining and drinking at Abigail for a night. I wasn't there to really kind of bus and serve in that sense. I was there for another reason. Like you said, someone might take a job as a waiter or a host while they're pursuing some other dream or fulfilling some other career. You can see and feel the difference when someone is doing what they love they're committed to it, they're focused upon it, and they want to grow within it. And that's just what I heard from both of you. So let's talk about the beer dinner, the elegance of beer. This is July 30th, starting at 4 p.m. It's at Acorn Cafe in Healdsburg. It's a 6-course tasting menu. I believe this is the first beer dinner in a series that you were planning. Tell us a little bit more about why should someone come out other than for sake of maybe seeing me try my hand at service again. Why does someone want to buy a ticket to this meal? Which is it comes with a price tag. This kind of quality, this kind of service, this kind of experience comes with a price tag. So tell us why and how we buy tickets. Tell us what to expect from the evening. Share a little bit of the pairings that are in the works without giving it all away. So both of you, David, Brian, how will we know this is, well, first of all, what do you want to accomplish by doing this? And at the end of the night, when we're all sharing a beer together, how will we know that it's a success? Please share.
Yeah. So to answer the question of what do we want to accomplish by doing this, I will start by saying that this for me is not a money-making scheme or trying to build out a specific type of event. The ticket price is high, but we created a higher ticket price to give us more capabilities to execute what we want to execute. I didn't want to just put out a $95 per person ticket price and then have to compromise on the quality that we're going to be giving. So, yes. If I break even on this dinner, I'll be super happy. So what we want to get out of it is, I think the black and white version is just to do something really fun and to challenge ourselves and to think about something just a little bit differently, to be unique. So Elegance of Beer is what I hope to be the first of a new series. If it's well received in the community, not just locally, but the brewers and Bay Area and California residents as a whole, we can continue doing these beer dinners. It is advertised right now as a 6-course tasting menu, although I would expect more than just 6 courses on the food side, or at least that certain courses are going to have multiple components to them. The cuisine itself is still in development. We actually don't have the menu ready for it yet. It's about 60% R&D'd and ready to go, but we still have some work to do, especially on the beer pairing side. But you can bet that all of the products from the food standpoint are going to feature local Sonoma County suppliers, and you're going to get to not only hear about Moonlight beers, but of course where your food is coming from, as we touched on before. So we have our beer lineup from Moonlight that we're going to be featuring. It's of course all Moonlight beers. The only other beverage that will be available will be coffee around dessert. And then if somebody does want to do some non-alcoholic options, we'll have say like an artisan juice or something available. And I will say too that the beer pairing is technically optional. You can just come to this dinner and not participate in the beer pairing itself. And the reason we're doing that is because the venue itself is what you're purchasing the beer from. The ticket that you're buying from us on our website is only for the dinner portion to make sure that we are within compliance. The beer is being purchased on site through the liquor license that is at this venue. So here are a couple of examples of what to expect. So your first beer pairing for the night is going to be with side of rice. We have taken the puffed rice product that starts this beer. We are currently testing this to see how it works when you're frying or roasting something or incorporating it into certain recipes. And so the dish is going to be made with the rice that the beer was brewed with, and it's going to be a rice-focused dish. The second, which is going to be a huge surprise, will be Death and Taxes. And I've been really trying to put this out there because, as we talked about in the very beginning of this conversation, Death and Taxes, as we know, is formatted to be a beer that you drink in the hot sun, and therefore it is a lighter bodied beer. And so we're going to be pairing Death and Taxes not with the dessert as you would expect from a black beer, but as your second course, and it's going to be prepared with local oysters from Hog Island. you can definitely bet that there will be multiple versions of this beer being poured. There will certainly be a Maliko tap brought in and connected into the draft system at Acorn Cafe, and you will see multiple versions of Death and Taxes being poured, as well as multiple different pairings with just this one beer alone. And I'm going to save some of the other surprises for the night. But I've been closely in touch with Zach throughout his processes to see where he's at with brewing. And last week they just did the brewing for Working for Tips, which is Brian's famous redwood beer. And Zach set aside about 3 gallons of the sweet wort that was used in the brewing process. We have that back in our kitchen. We vac sealed it. We froze it. And that redwood wort will be used and kind of cooked down as a syrup and into cakes. And we're going to be doing a local redwood focused dessert to pair with Working for Tips. So if those things aren't enough of a reason that you should just come in the first place to see what we're doing from the culinary side, I think that, this experience is something that will never happen this way again. There's a phrase that I love in Japanese culture called ichigo ichie, which means one chance and one encounter. And it's the sense of that you can do something multiple times. We can have this dinner one time, and then we can do the same dinner the very next week in the same place with Adam and with Moonlight Brewing, but it won't be this experience that we're putting on. That every experience you have is always a once in a lifetime experience, and it will never be that way again. And so, I certainly intend to continue working with Moonlight from the Camber perspective, as well as Brunch Boys, as our little food truck operation pops up from time to time outside of the brewery. But this is just something that, we're never going to do it this way again. And it's going to be really special. We can promise that, the service is going to be impeccable with our friends from the local 3-star restaurants. And we're bringing in some really, really talented chefs to be a part of our team. Adam will be in the dining room. No promises if he's going to spill something on you or not. And Brian will be there in some capacity. We've, invited Brian given him the choice if he wants to dine or wants to be on the floor talking about the beers themselves. So yeah, it's going to be a really special experience all around. So then, in terms of the technicalities of it, we'll share the information via the Instagram and everything that this podcast goes out on. But our website is camberevents.com. Right on the top page, there's a tab there for events, and that'll take you right to the Elegance of Beer. You can purchase tickets through our website. So the tickets are $225 per person, which for a dining experience, especially at this level, is actually not that much. There's restaurants right down the street that are charging $500, $600 per person before the beverage pairing. Yes. And then that just doesn't include gratuity, and there's a little bit of sales tax on top of that. And then the beer pairing itself is going to be $65. Again, this is totally optional. You do not need to participate in the beer pairing itself, but we hope that you do, and that'll just be charged on site. And I would, right? That's part of the intention. So that'll be charged on site when you finish your dining experience, is how many beer pairings you will be doing. And then it wouldn't be right if I just came on the show and started promoting our event without doing something associated with it. And so we are on the No Life Til Lager podcast, and therefore when you go to checkout on our website and purchase your tickets, if you put on the coupon code NLTL, all caps, that gets you 25% off your dinner tickets. So anybody who's listening to this and grab some tickets from this podcast, specifically NLTL, at checkout gets you 25% off your tickets. So I hope you come out and see what we're doing, and of course appreciate the great beers of Moonlight.
Excellent. I love it. I think if you have been listening, you know your brewer and your brewery now. You know your chef, and you know that this experience will be like none other as a result. An expression of these two humans putting their art to work together. David, I cannot tell you.
Question. Why would you put redwood in like food or beer?
Are you just opening up a can of worms now?
The last time we were in the same room together, the three of us, Brian went outside and he clipped a redwood branch and handed me some of the needles and said, "Here, eat these." And I'm like, "What do you mean? Like, you can't eat these?" He's like, no, eat these. They're totally edible. And I tried this redwood tree. It was the first time I had ever just eaten like raw redwood. And I mean, this was just another epiphany moment in the same way of trying Death and Taxes for the first time. And as we were, talking through the pairings and I learned more about working for tips, what it is and why it is, I said, we have to do that. And I want to do it as a dessert. And so it'll be the first time anyone's making a dessert from a tree. And I'm pretty excited about that.
Super exciting.
What terroir is that? That seems like something it would be perfect for this county.
Distinctly and unmistakably Northern California. David, I'll say again, I'm so honored to participate in this and contribute however I can as an advanced Cicerone. Again, you're one of two and very few that have asked me to put those skills to use, to test those chops, and I cannot wait. I'm grateful to you for reaching out and including me in this. Brian, can you tell us just a little bit about, have you done previous beer dinners and how you might expect this one to be different? And again, just what does success look like to you at the end of the night when we're all having a beer together, be it working for tips, be it Death and Taxes? What do you want to achieve from doing this with Moonlight?
I'd like everybody at the end to go, damn, that was good. And and to walk away going,
yes.
To walk away going, I hadn't thought of that flavor combination, or God, I never had that before, or I hadn't thought of something that way.
Yeah.
And I walked out of some dinners before where you just think, God, I thought I knew everything about food tastes like this, but this just took me in a different direction. That it's just like a little inspiration to realize everything you know is wrong. And I love that when beer or food or some sensory thing takes you out of your normal place of your routine and just lets you know there's more out there than you may have recognized.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you done beer dinners before? And have you ever seen anyone like David putting so much thought and so much effort and so much creativity and curation into it?
I've done a few beer dinners before, and I'm expecting this to be a little less traditional than some, and that delights me up one side and down the other.
Yeah.
And I'm so looking forward to it.
Yeah.
I that's something I've always felt about California and Sonoma County, is a creative aspect that we do here. And I see that in David, and I can't wait. And I may be on the floor talking, but I'm also going to be tasting this stuff.
Oh,
perfect.
Damn straight.
I sure hope so.
Yeah. And like you said, you want people to walk away, quote, I think it says it on your cans, damn, that's tasty, but also, damn I never thought about that before. Yeah, damn, that's good. And
and damn, I'm sure glad I had this one experience, because I could have missed it.
Could have missed it. Yeah. And not to be recreated. It's a moment in time to savor. As you've said before. Tell me again
that Japanese quote, please.
Ichigo Ichie, one chance, one encounter.
One chance, one encounter. Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
It's like, we could come back and film this episode again tomorrow and sit on our computers and have the same conversation, but it won't be the same. This moment that we've created right now. What we're doing in this moment will only happen this way one time, and then that's it.
That's one of the few things that makes podcasting really fun and really enjoyable for me. I don't think I'd be speaking to either of you right now, together or apart, if it weren't for this dinner. So as Moonlight says, respected beer is tasty beer. The same applies to food, and beer is food. Beer is fundamentally food.
Beer is good food.
Beer is good food, right? And respected food is good food. And this will be an expression of good beer and good food together. Before we move along and wrap up, David, if you could just say once again, when this is happening, where this is happening, and how to join, we are grateful for it.
For sure. So the date is July 30th. It's going to be at Acorn Cafe in Healdsburg. So Acorn Cafe was a restaurant that was recently renovated. It took over the old Oakville grocery spot. The owner is a super, super nice guy. He's so incredibly stoked to have us there and host at his restaurant. I think that he's created a space that can act as what it is, which is a kind of casual breakfast and lunch space, but then can be easily converted into this fine dining restaurant. And because he's not open for dinners, we are taking over his space and his kitchen and his dining room for this dinner. And so we are going to do it like a restaurant service. It'll be staggered seating, and so you're not sitting down with a big group of people and all eating the same thing at the same time. You can come in with a group of 2 or 4, or hopefully no more than 6, and sit down with your table as you know, as you would in a restaurant. And we'll do seatings from 4 o'clock up until 8:30 p.m. And the way that you're getting tickets is it is on Eventbrite. So if you feel that you want to trust Eventbrite more than a website that you haven't been on before, but I can promise that our website and our credit card processing is all very legit through our business. So again, camberevents.com /live events, or just go to camberevents.com and just navigate into the events page. And then it's very easy just to see the information there, and the place that you purchase your dinner tickets. Again, beer pairing tickets will be purchased via credit card on site directly from Acorn Cafe. And yeah, I mean, they say about Michelin star restaurants that 1 star deserves a stop, and 2 star deserves a detour, and 3 stars deserves a destination. And, you know, I can't necessarily promise that this is going to match up to the greatest 3-star restaurant in the world. You know, one thing is that we are doing this for one night. And therefore, we are putting together a team of friends and chefs and professionals to execute this. We are not doing a dry run or a friends and family night. And but I trust everybody that's there. And we don't necessarily have, you know, the resources that go behind one of, you know, like a 4 seasons type of dining room per se. But we are going to give it absolutely everything that we have. And we promise that we are going to deliver an experience that is worth the destination. So.
Or it could just phenomenally exceed expectations.
Yeah.
Well, that's of course the idea. Yeah.
No one should miss that.
Yeah. And we're, you know, it's also just like a tasting room restaurant, tasting menu restaurant. We are not releasing the menu ahead of time. So when you come in, you don't know what the menu is going to be. It is going to be a chef's curated menu specifically for this dinner. Just let us know when you fill out your booking if you do have any dietary restrictions, and we will do our best to accommodate that. We can certainly adjust some dishes and some menu items to make sure that you're not excluded if you're, say, pescatarian or even vegetarian. We can certainly accommodate that for you.
And all the Moonlight beers are gluten reduced, or if that's an issue, it's not an issue.
That is yet another thing that makes Moonlight shine. All the beers, do we understand you correctly? All the beers are gluten reduced by adding an enzyme, I think, to the fermentation process that basically breaks down the gluten from the grain. And you can't say it necessarily eliminates it or makes it gluten-free just because of the way gluten is regulated these days. But labeling aside, all Moonlight beers are gluten reduced, and that also caters to dietary needs that anyone might encounter with this dinner, correct?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep. And that's a conversation I've been, you know, having with guests who are kind of skeptical, you know, folks who are in the wine industry and are used to food and wine pairings. And I say, you know, I'm doing this beer dinner, and they say, you know, I don't drink as much beer. I don't like the heavy feeling that it produces. And I say, well, that's one thing that's really unique about Moonlight's beers, is because of the reduced gluten from the enzyme that they add, is that when you walk away, you don't feel as heavy as you would drinking, you know, high alcohol IPAs and big saisons. And with that too, because we're actually choosing some of Moonlight's lightest beers in their portfolio, the menu that we're serving is also a very light menu. It won't be gluten-free because we're going to be incorporating things like barley and other ingredients that you might find in beer. But the menu itself will probably make you feel less heavy than, say, a French menu that's full of butter and that you leave with an acidic feeling after drinking all that wine.
All good things. And
there will be some butter though, right?
Oh yeah.
Oh, there will be butter for sure. And it will be Sonoma County
there
butter.
will be.
Yeah.
There will be butter. There will be some gluten. There will be something of all things that makes life worth living. But yes, to the beers being gluten reduced and that feeling of being full from beer, that's a common complaint, right? That it makes me feel full, heavy, bloated. That's often from the carbonation, from the gas included within the beer. And when beer is served properly out of proper glassware, which I know has been cited, when beer is not over carbonated, which is often the case with kind of big beer, American produced, shall we say that word again, adjunct lagers. Sometimes that can be incredibly filling, even though it's perceptively a low alcohol or should be a light beer. Because this beer will be served in small portions and proper glassware, I don't think we have to worry about guests feeling overly full, overly bloated, overly heavy from some sense of carbonation or the gas, the pressure contained within each beer.
Now, they'll be perfectly delighted, is what I'm expecting.
Yeah.
Perfectly delighted. All right. Well, you heard it here. Please join us for the Elegance of Beer pairing dinner with Moonlight and Camber on July 30th. On that note, I am going to say thank you so very much, Brian Hunt from Moonlight.
Thank you for having us, Adam.
Thank you so very much, David Carey of Camber Events and Brunch Boys. Thank you for sharing your beer with me. I look forward to seeing what you create, David, at the Elegance of Beer pairing dinner on July 30th and contributing and participating however I can. And I can't wait to share a beer and a plate together, all said and done. So if you like what you're hearing, I will say like, follow, subscribe, no Life Til Lager, but much more importantly, purchase a ticket to the Elegance of Beer dinner with Camber Events, and ultimately help us hit the road and make a better kind of beer show and capture events and experiences like this that are once in a lifetime. So until July 30th in the Elegance of Beer at Acorn Cafe, my friends, I will say good night and good lager. Thank you so very much. Cheers.
Toast.
Thank you, Adam.
No life till